All right, so this week we're doing some speed painting, and we're going to learn a little bit about setting up our workspace a little differently, take advantage of the layout of Photoshop, trying to learn how to manage windows and how to look at different images at the same time, use maybe a little bit of source, um, and just when we're looking at the speed paintings, you'll notice how some people approach these a little bit differently. Um, some people are using layers, a lot of layers. Some people aren't using a lot of layers. We watched how our first video was blocking out with grays, so that kind of just working with three tones and then building out from those three tones. You'll see in a lot of videos people are using some adjustment layers to create colors, and that's how this image is created. And so, I'm going to try and build this up with you guys, and sort of more or less copying what other people are doing, but I want to really spend a little bit of time on what the things I'm seeing they're doing that I think would be helpful to you right now. And they do have to do with photography and some of the other effects that we're going to be working with, especially these things that are called like hue saturation, for instance. And you notice I'm using a lot of hues and saturation. I created a levels here. Maybe we'll use the levels. It's really more or less an introduction into how to utilize these adjustment layers, and they're really powerful in terms of color. And you'll notice that this image is actually black and white, so I'm going to hide these saturations. You'll see that in actuality, well, let's leave that levels on there because that's not actually a hue and saturated. You can see that there's actually not color in this image. What's creating the color are these hue and saturation. So just like you've been seeing in some of the other videos, I've been really just working with a base uh, color or grayscale, and then kind of working out from there with levels, or rather hue and saturation. It's kind of, that was a background that I wasn't sure if I wanted. Let's turn these back on. You can see that I can kind of create a little bit of color, and it's not like exactly what I'm after, but it's a good way to start the coloring and start after blocking, kind of getting a little bit into color. And it's just a different way of approaching it. So you don't get caught up in picking colors right off the bat, which I think is actually really super smart and really helpful. And you can kind of build these up with the hue and saturation, and then once you feel like this is looking good, you can come back through with tighter and tighter painting technique. I think that this looks pretty good, and the main thing, again, right here when we're working with speed paintings is to get kind of a sense of something, how it looks. I don't think this looks quite as good as some of the ones you've been looking at. I'm not really, I don't think of myself as a great painter or digital painter. Um, I can do okay. I'm doing this all with a mouse. It's a little bit more challenging. I think some of the things you're seeing are using a Wacom tablet or something like that, and it does help to be able to work with those tool sets. But enough of introduction. Let's get into it. So the first thing that you'll notice is that I have an image that's I took from the internet, and so always it's recommended that you find an image that you like and take that image and use that as a resource. So I can save this image, and instead of putting it in my see if I can go to PSD documents. That'll get me to the online. I actually want to put this into my source images folder, right? Um, maybe let's put it in this one because, well, actually I've been working from this one. Let's put it there. And it's got a weird name. I'm just going to go through and just give that a better name because I don't really care for that name very much. Look at that name. It's a crazy name. I'll just call it tree. curly because it's pretty curly. There we go. So, downloading that image just so I can have it and put in my source images, just trying to like kind of reiterate how we use that project folder and using that project folder. I'm just going to hide that. You can see that I didn't actually follow the formatting of the image. So this is a real vertical looking image, and I ended up with a horizontal image. I'm just going to close this. Well, actually, let's minimize that so I can leave that open. Let's close this navigator. I'll close this image. Won't save it. So usually when you're looking at Photoshop, actually maybe it's better that I do close this because I've set this up in a little bit of a different way than the way we normally work. So let's go ahead and let's go like this. This is kind of how this is recents. Actually, I don't want to look at recents. Oh, whatever. Let's do it this way. I'm going to create a new. So I'm getting a little distracted by that. And remember, the setup here is important in that we're looking for 300 ppi. That was the important thing. Okay, that image I was just working with was 1920 by 1080. Just again, watch out for the pixels an inch. Like, so if you are using these defaults, there are some that are set up as inch, but just make sure you're not doing 1920 inches. That's a huge image, right? Main thing really is the 300 ppi. Create that. So this is kind of where we started, and what I realized is I didn't mention, for some of you, you're probably seeing for the first time, if you open this for the first time, you're probably seeing this thing called libraries on the side. Just notice I'm going to Windows to see this, okay? You probably have your libraries open. It probably looks something similar to this. I think they have something else open too. I can't quite remember because I'm not there. It's something like styles. I'm not sure what they have open over there. I can't remember. I think there's another thing sitting here that's on top of this, but you're using up this extra space here, and because we're talking about our layout for a moment, I just want to kind of mention that I think it's a good idea to turn these off. Like if you're not using your libraries, turn these off. And I think there's actually two here, so I'm sorry I can't remember what the other one is, but if you click on these lines here, some people call them a stack of pancakes. I've heard other people refer to them as hamburgers. I call it a menu window or a menu icon. I don't know. It's a lot of names for that. If you look at the bottom, there's something called close tab group, and I'm just going to close that and just close it, and it's gone. And that's why I'm not seeing that on my version of Photoshop, and I kind of prefer having that gone. I don't want to see any, I don't want it to take up space on my screen if I don't have to. So that's the layout item number one. So, just go through, and if there's something that you don't want open, just close it, okay? If you make a mistake and you say, for instance, we close this tab group and we don't like that, one of the things that you want to take a look at is, if you mess up your workspace too intensely, you can always go to the top here, and you'll see how this is called a work group, okay? Or workspace, rather. If you click on this, you're actually in Essentials. That's how you start off in Photoshop. And if I were to mess things up really intensely, I can always go to Reset Essentials. And you see how, oh, actually I should have done that right off the bat. That's what's there. It's called Learn. That was good. Learn in libraries. There we go. That's what's there. So, if you mess everything up and you want to go back and see it like how it originally was, that's how it originally is. So I'll click on this, and you can see I can close tab group and close tab group. And now I'm back to what I think is a little bit better setup, and you'll see in a moment I'm going to set it up even more different. And so you can see adjustments and layers and stuff like that. So going back over to the project folder, let's open that up for a moment. And we call that tree, right? So opening up a file in Photoshop, there's a couple ways to do this. What I like to do with Photoshop is that it's really comfortable with you dragging images into the software. So I'm just going to take this tree curly and drop it right on Photoshop. Just see like that. Um, did that really weird. I held too long when I did that. Let me do that one more time and just drop that into Photoshop like that, like that. And it opens up as a separate tab right there. So I have two tabs now. You see this at the top. So I have my untitled document I just created and then tree curly. Okay. If you are having a hard time or you don't have the ability to drag like that, one of the ways you can approach this is just make Photoshop a little bit smaller like this. Okay. And I can just take tree curly. It's a little awkward moving these windows around like this. That's kind of why I don't like this method necessarily. But so watch how I'm going to do this. I'm going to drag tree curly, and I want to be careful where I drop this. And I want to drop it right in that tab region, right in this gray area, right where I'm dropping this. So if I let go right here, see how it makes its own tab? I'm going to close that one more time. If I miss that, and if I drag and I drop just in the window, it'll look like it works, but just notice that what happened was different. I didn't get a new file document. I dropped a layer into my original untitled. So it's asking me, to scale it and stuff like that. You'll notice that certain things won't be available. If you try and brush, the brush won't work. Certain things will just not want to work because you haven't actually accepted things. We don't want to do this. I'm just going to undo that. So just watch out for this a little bit when if you are doing this method that you are dragging and dropping up in this one area, right where this tab is, right? It's this gray area. It's a little difficult to notice the difference there. It's very subtle. There's no icon. If you go down here, it'll drop in there, but I want to drop it right there, and that gives me two separate files like that. And that's what I want for this setup. Moving on with laying this out. So what you noticed before is the way I was looking at it earlier, just a moment ago, I was able to see all of I had the curly tree open. I had like a navigator open and stuff like that. And so the way that we set that up, it's kind of unique, is that I'm actually dragging these tabs off. So sometimes it's nice to work between tabs like this and just have separate files open. And I've actually been doing that. You may have noticed in the videos there's been tabs up here. But right now, what I want to do is I'm gonna take the untitled document and watch this. I'm going to drag this off. I'm just going to see how I'm dragging this tab, and I'm just going to let go. And now it just becomes a separate window within the Photoshop document, right? So now it's a floating window within Photoshop, okay? And I'm going to do the same thing with the tree. I'm going to take the tree and I'm going to drag it off, and I'm going to let go. And now I have a floating, it's kind of hard to grab a floating tree document. So now I'm actually able to look at both of these at the same time, which is pretty awesome. Okay. Now it's a little bit easier to work with Photoshop if you're not right on the edge of your image, right? So we'll drag this off. And that gives us a little bit of edge to work on, so our tools and our paintbrushes can come to the edges, especially if we're going to do like a soft brush like we're doing with our sphere. Okay. So this is looking good. So now I can also set up the navigator, and that was another thing that some of the speed painters were talking about, or the digital painters are talking about. And it is a really good thing to use if you are going to do a lot of painting. So that's up in the window. And here's where we can grab all kinds of, but for instance, the workspace. In the past, I've talked to people about Arrange, but I kind of like the setup I have right now a little bit better. So let's not even go there. But notice here's some of the things that are available that we can have out in the world. So if you ever want to change up the look of your space, this is where you do it. You pick out different things. So we're going to start with Navigator. Okay, come back. This is the navigator, and the way the navigator works, it has a little like from a ship where you steer an old ship, right? I think that's what that looks like to me. It comes with two things. It has this histogram. It has this navigator. The histogram is a little bit awkward to talk about right off the bat. It has to do with color. Let's not worry about that. And just watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to do the same thing we did with those images. I'm just going to click this and drag this and drop it like that. And so now we have this open like this, right? And we can drag that out. And it doesn't make total sense quite yet because we haven't really painted anything, so we won't see that yet. But this is kind of the layout that I've had. I'm going to just take that histogram. I'm just going to click on these two double arrows right here. That just minimizes that. You can say click on that and it minimizes it. Much like the undos that we talked about in previous videos.